times to look at the HRMD plan, which is basically our plan for training, preparing leaders in the district. There were some changes made, some slight changes. We're not asking the board to approve it until the May meeting, so you have time to look at it, digest it. But Ms. Boytaylor is just going to give you a quick highlight of what those changes were. There weren't a lot of changes to it. Once you approve it in May, then we'll send it to the state for their approval. But we wanted to give you some time to look at it. That's why we're bringing it early. Go ahead.
Good morning. He's covered most of my presentation, so here we go. As Mr. Mellon shared with you, I'm bringing to you today a brief overview of our Citrus County Schools Human Resources Management and Development Plan, and really going to focus on more specifically some details for our Preparing the Leaders program. So just to start, just give you a little background on it. Our we have an HRMD committee members that we meet twice a year. We have administrative representatives from all school levels. District administrators serve on the committee as well, assistant superintendent, HR director, and then ed services administrators. We have a school board member, Mr. Kennedy. He's there for our meetings. And like I said, we meet about twice a year. Just a little background information on our HRMD plan. There are different sections in our plan, and we begin, the first section involves the screening and selection process of administrative and supervisory positions throughout the district. So that kind of just takes through the typical posting, the process that we go through for screening. And then the rest of the plan really involves our leadership development plans that we have for the staff of Citrus County Schools. So we have the Support Leadership Academy, the Potential Leadership Program, and the Preparing the Leaders Program. In all of these programs, we really like to look at the leadership development process that helps to support continuous improvement of individuals and our organizations. And we look at using research-based practices, and we try to really make sure that we provide learning experiences that can be applied in both the school and district leadership settings. We use a variety of resources, online, personal, books, and different trainings like that to help support the training. And then we also try to focus on each individual's strength and how those strengths, the strengths of others, and how that can be applied to the role of leadership in our district. So the first one of our leadership programs is the Support Leadership Academy. Involves representatives from all sites and departments. They are invited by supervisors. So when we run the cohort of the Support Leadership Academy, departments invite one or two representatives from each of their sites, and they participate in this training program. It's a 30-hour program. It involves some leadership philosophy that we ground ourselves with in Citrus County, involving servant leadership, and look at some of the work of Gallup. And then we really try to focus on understanding ourselves and others by using Strength Finders. We do training for that. Then we do an overview of departments and roles and responsibilities, and that's when the different departments come in and they provide presentations and give a little background about who we are in the district and what the responsibilities are in each of those. And then those participants are required to attend one school board meeting, submit a meeting summary and reflections of their experience. So that's the Support Leadership Academy. We run this about once every 2 years, and we'll do for our next session.
That way. I like that it wasn't on. Okay. So our next program is the Potential Leadership Program. This is for those people who are considering the idea. It's for instructional personnel that are considering going into leadership of some capacity in our district. They must have 3 years of prior teaching experience and be in the either process of pursuing their ed leadership degree, considering their ed leadership degree, or working towards certification in that. It is a screening criteria for administrative positions in our district that they have completed the Potential Leadership Program through us. It too is a 30-hour training program that follows the same format of our Support Leadership Academy. But it also has a 30-hour individual leadership project that is based on the Florida Principal Leadership Standards. And that is something they do in coordination with their administrative staff, and they come up with a 30-hour project in different ways that they can either support some leadership activities at their school. And we just finished our 15-16 cohort this past week, and we had 25, 27 participants in that cohort. We've been working together all year. So the main purpose of bringing this to you today is just to give you an overview of our other leadership program, which is the Preparing New Leaders program. Preparing New Leaders program is a 2-year program that will lead to principal certification. And it is reviewed by the state on every 5 years. And it is something that we must submit that is similar to the endorsement plans that we submit, reading endorsement, ESOL endorsement. It too must be aligned to the Florida Principal Leadership Standards. And at our last in 2012, we had our last protocol review, and that was when the professional development system was reviewed, and we received a perfect score on every indicator, 4 out of 4 on every indicator, and there's multiple indicators of that leadership plan. So we were directed by the Florida Department of Education that we need to make a change to our plan and realign it to the new Florida Principal Leadership Standards. As we worked through this with the HRMD team and we went through everything, after having a perfect score in 2012, we didn't want to change too much, right? If it's working, let's continue, but we needed to realign it to the new Principal Leadership Standards. We did tweak the eligibility for participation. In our 2008 HRMD plan, anyone who was in a quasi-leadership role was eligible to begin this. When we were getting to the end of the 2-year program and submitting to the Department of Education to say, okay, this person has completed, there was a lot of questions about their job responsibilities and were they really acting in administrative roles. So in the new revised HRMD plan, it will involve that only candidates eligible will be those who are currently serving in an administrative capacity, in an assistant principal role or in a supervisor role. We did align some of our trainings and the activities to the new Florida Principal Leadership Standards, and we did make some changes in required trainings due to some that are out of date, and also because some are no longer available. There was an IBM Change Toolkit, which was one of the required trainings that we would take people through, but that is no longer available to us to use as a training. So the Preparing New Leaders program really involves 4 different elements. There's the self-assessment, where we ask the individuals to really get to understand themselves, where their strengths are in the different principal leadership standards. And then from that, they also create a customized learning plan where they have an opportunity to develop some of the areas they may not have had as many opportunities to learn in. Then we have some different leadership training, and then there's an evaluation of the progress as we go through. There are 3 standards that the state requires as part of our Preparing New Leaders program. There's standard 1 that involves that core curriculum content, and it has to be aligned with the Florida Principal Leadership Standards and includes all the state mandated requirements. There's another the standard 2 involves candidate performance, where each candidate is asked to demonstrate the competencies identified. And then standard 3, continuous improvement, where we continue to implement a process to ensure continuous improvement of the program. And that's why we meet regularly and discuss what we're doing in these training programs and how our candidates are progressing. The last couple of slides are just giving you some pieces that are in the plan. Here's the concept map for the new PNLP candidates that have been going, our 2014-2016 cohort that have been going through. Year 1 typically involves all of the training. We had them involve our main required trainings involve creating a high performance learning culture, leading assessment and instruction, and then 7 habits of highly effective people. There are other activities involved that they do through the WCG Department of Education website that has them do some prior learning inventories, so they do some self-assessments of themselves. At the end of year one, we have them start thinking about their individual leadership plans that they will work on through year two. Year two, they are really now is applying the different things they've learned in the trainings that they were involved in year one. They do 4 different leadership plans based on their self-assessments and their needs for growth. There is also a component of developing an organizational plan or portfolio where they start thinking about, okay, if I was named a principal tomorrow at a new school, what activities would I do in the first 10 days? Who do I need to meet with? What would be my message? What would be the premise of my message that would go out to the staff? What are some things I would consider in interviewing candidates that I could make sure would bring out to match the philosophy of what we want to carry on in our school? And then at the conclusion of the second year, once they've successfully completed their plans and they've completed the different training programs, then they are now eligible to apply for principal level certification. This last chart is the matrix of professional development and job embedded learning experiences, and there's multiple pages to this in the actual plan itself. But it's kind of showing you how we take our leadership workshops, the different trainings, and how they align to each of the indicators within the standards of the principal leadership standards. And then the job embedded learning experiences, those are samples of what people could be doing, but they also then match up from their learning plan, what have they done to demonstrate competency or mastery in those different leadership standards.
Who fills that out?
It's in coordination with their site administrator and their district member team, which would be myself. I meet with them, and when we meet, we go through and agree on what their leadership plans, what was covered as far as the principal leadership standards. So our next steps from this point is giving you the opportunity to review the plan more in depth. You'll see the crossouts that are through the plan to give you an idea of really the tweaks were just in training. Did some things to make it easier to read, to understand which each indicator involved, and that realignment process to the new standards. We'll be bringing it to the May board meeting to seek approval of our Preparing New Leaders program, and then we'll submit it to DOE. Do you have any questions about the plan?
I just noticed this time, this is like the third time I was part of the group talking to potential leaders, and they seem much more relaxed than I've seen them before, and very aware of what they were doing. The information that was given, they understood the information. So it was really a very good session, and I enjoyed talking to the people, but the relaxation really impressed me. Everyone was just relaxed and doing what they needed to do.
This cohort group we had, it was smaller. The last one that I was involved in had 45 participants, and they really did bond with each other. It was 25, 27, and they really, they were very attentive. They were very appreciative of the opportunity to learn and all the information that was shared from the different departments. Had asked really good questions. They asked really good questions in all of their different sessions. So it was a very good group, very cohesive group.
Yes.
Is the teacher on special assignment, is that kind of a stepping stone to administration in the district?
It could be. It could be. We have several teachers on special assignment that do then go on and pursue administrative positions, but then we have some that are basically more content or specific to that job that may or may not be interested in.
Well, you used the term quasi-leadership position, so I was trying to figure out what were the
The
quasi-leadership?
positive leadership involved teachers on special assignment, guidance counselors, ESC specialists, athletic directors, deans, those different roles.
Since we have, 3 in
Yes.
Yes, I was gonna say that.
Deans.
Yeah, correct.
So,
And the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is still, that's been around quite a while. I mean, you still feel like that's the right.
we had stepped away from that for a little while, but it really is the premise. I've been in the county since 1987. I'm in my 29th year. And it really was a premise of my leadership development and many of the other leaders. And we feel like we had stepped away from it. And there was a need, there was a desire to revitalize it. We didn't have any other trainers that were involved with 7 Habits. They went back to, we had a team that went. Mrs. Himmel, Mr. Mullen, Scott Hebert, Mr. Hebert and Mr. Bishop went and really came back with that's a value of what we're grounded in, seeking and then looking through those 7 habits and how we infuse those into our daily work. That, along with servant leadership, were the 2 essences that we feel that ground us in our district, and that we're one of those philosophies and beliefs to carry on.
Old is sometimes better.
It's
Oh, I
still,
like 7 habits, I mean, I think
And they've made it.
they've updated a lot of the information
Last year.
last September.
it's a newly revised edition. No.
No, it really is. They added.
It's even more revised than we do.
Or abbreviated.
And in looking at leadership plans, the Preparing New Leaders Program plans in neighboring counties and across the state, they too ground themselves in 7 habits. And I as part of the Florida Association of Staff Development, that is one thing that we shared of something that some of us had stepped away, but we all came back feeling it was important to embed in our training programs.
Lyndon, when we talk about this in the HR, or HR&D committee, but one of our leaders that goes through our PLP, they go through, that process 1 or 2 years, and they're going through our system versus someone who maybe comes from the outside community, and they, by the time someone's gone through those 2 years, especially if they've been raised in here, they have a very good, as we've talked about, culture of what Citrus County's successes are, what makes us successful, our management style, our community as a whole. It's not that we don't like someone from the outer area, but it does become a little more challenging because they haven't gone through those processes.
And I think it becomes evident if they make it through screening processes, it's that lack of understanding of the culture and the success and the things that we have done, the leadership style in Citrus County, it sometimes does come out in the interview process. That is something that does not necessarily match the needs or the wants of the district.
I say have them come here, do the PLT. They'll learn so much about what makes us successful, and then but it's again, I think that when you see that process unfold, you have great respect for Citrus County's leaders and that are coming through because they are about us and about our kids specifically.
Any other questions?
Is there a test at the end?
There a test for the participants?
Yes.
For the Preparing New Leaders Program, there is not necessarily a test, but they do have the 4 leadership plans. We meet mid-year, we review them, we review progress. So there is a sign-off of verification of completion and demonstration of the competencies, but not necessarily a test.
So,
It's a portfolio.
so basically though, pretty much everyone who goes into the program completes the program, correct? Or is there
No,
some
That's not
washout?
true. There are some that have not, that don't complete what they are expected to complete, and they do not complete the program.
But that portfolio at the end have been often what they've used to implement as administrators, if I
Yeah, we
recall.
want it to be something that's useful to you.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like I often hear them saying, I pulled out my,
Exactly. They refer to training resources from the culture modules, from the leading assessment instruction, seven habits, any of the training strength finders, they will pull out resources from their previous training, and then also from the leadership development plans to help support them as they begin that next path, next journey, next role.
I just have to compliment, I think we've always done a great job in Citrus County developing new leaders, but I came onto the committee when Lindy and Mr. Mullen both kind of came on to that, part of that success, and I just will say, I think that there's been such positive improvements, revisions, and just addressing things for the next generation of leaders, so thank you. And the stuff I know that you're working on for even coming up in the next year is going to be just more positive.
Thank
And
you.
it seems unnatural, but it's, all the people are going through it, it's like they suddenly drank something that made them think all in unison, it's natural, but this is the way to do it, and it's a good way to do it. So.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you?
No, I was just laughing at your drinks.
Oh, yes. Coca-Cola. Next, we have House Bill 7029.
Yeah, we were asked at the last board meeting to bring, for discussion, the athletic portion only of House Bill 7029, and I asked Mr. Sheffield to also have a couple of athletic directors that could be here to answer any questions or as to how this may impact our schools or their sports teams. So Bruce, you want to introduce the two ADs we have with us?
Before Mr. Dodd says, so on the first page, right under clarifying languages, the first statute needs to be retyped. Yeah, before Mr. Dodd says.
You want it to talk?
Yeah, right underneath clarifying language, it's just about this.
Well, this was provided by the FHSAA, so I didn't have anything to do with the timing of this, so.
Move to send a letter.
Got it.
Good morning, school board members, Ms. Semmel, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Bradshaw. I've been asked to come in today and to kind of give you an overview of House Bill 7029 and its effects on athletics and how it may affect our schools. With me today I have the athletic directors from Crystal River High School, Bobby Verlato, and from Lecanto High School, Ron Allen. Mr. Larry Bishop extends his sorrow. He could not be here today. He is out of town, but he wanted to be here to answer any questions that you might have of him as well. As we all know, House Bill 7029 was the massive train bill that was passed this past legislative session. There were over 20 bills or more attached to this bill. The bill is 160 pages long, so to have to try to find all the stuff in there that affects athletics, you got to sit there and go through it almost line by line because everything is kind of piecemealed into this bill. So hopefully I'm going to be able to provide you some information. Like I said, the handout that I gave you was something that the Florida High School Activity Association sent out a couple of weeks ago, to schools and athletic directors to kind of say this is, the changes that we're looking at and where we're going with these. I know they had a board of directors meeting yesterday up at the FHSAA, and they discussed a lot of policy changes. We don't have all the information that's come out of there yet. This coming weekend is our annual FIAAA conference down in Orlando, and the FHSAA will be there, and there will be an entire session on House Bill 7029 where we'll have a chance to answer or ask questions that we don't know the answers to at that meeting. And so if there's any questions that you have that I don't cover today, I'll be sure to take those down to Orlando this weekend when we meet with the FHSAA and get those answered. The biggest part of this, that I see that it's going to affect out of the athletic part, is the controlled open enrollment part. And basically, it just basically said by the beginning of the 2017-18 school year, each school district, school board, or charter school shall allow a parent from any school district in the state whose child is not under current expulsion or suspension to enroll his or her child and transport his or her child to any public school, including charter schools, that has not reached capacity in the district subject to the maximum class size pursuant to that state statute. So basically, they're just saying if there's room in that school, that child can go there and participate. If that school is at capacity, that child cannot go to that school. Okay? So that was a question that's one of the questions we're looking at is how are they going to determine the capacity? Is it going to be off a fish report? It's going to, because there's a lot of variables that go into it. If I have a kid wants to transfer to this school, and I'm at capacity, I have all my seats in say a government class, this kid's a a senior is gonna need government, now what happens? Do I have to hire another teacher? You know, so we don't know, we don't have those answers to that part yet. But based on what the law says, the child can move, and he can go from county to county. If they want to go to Hernando County, they can go to Hernando County. If somebody from Hernando County wanted to come to Citrus County, if their parents can get them here, and we have room, they're supposed to be allowed to go. So that's the basis of the controlled open agreement.
So the parent has to provide
The
transportation.
parent has to provide transportation for that part.
But I thought the county change, or the district change wasn't gonna be till the second year, but that is correct, it is the first year?
No. None of this takes effect until 2017, till the 17-18 school year.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good.
The eligibility of the student athlete, school districts, the FHSA and charter schools may not delay eligibility if a student changes schools due to controlled open enrollment. So what they're saying is, if a student decides, you know, I'm going to one school and I want to move to the other school, I'm eligible immediately to go to play there. Now, there are some provisions to that. Students may not participate in the same sport in the same year at more than one school unless the following criteria are met. So basically, if I'm at school A and I'm playing football and we're losing every game, and school B over here in the same county is gonna, you know, they're undefeated, they're gonna be in the playoffs, and they got a chance to win a state championship, I cannot go to that school and play football there because I've already committed to playing football at school A. However, there are 4 criteria that would allow me to, and one of those would be, let me get it to you. Children who are of active duty military whose move resulted from military orders. In other words, when a kid moves into the school because their parents got relocated here and they were in the military, if they started, they were playing football in another place in the state, then they could play football in another school. Children relocated due to foster care. If I'm playing football at school A and I'm a foster kid and I get relocated to a home that's over actually in school B, I can go play football there because I'm a foster child. I'm relocated because of that foster program. Children who move due to court order change in custody due to separation or divorce or serious illness or death of the parent. You know, we might see that. You know, parent gets divorced, child decides to go live over here, wants to go play football at B, and I've already played at A. They're going to have to provide documentation that there's been a divorce or a separation, and then that parent has custody of that child. But that would allow them to do that. And then the last one would be district placement. If the district had to move a kid for a disciplinary reason or whatever reason, if it's in policy in district and you move a child by district placement, then they would be able to play the same sport at that other school. But other than that, I can't get mad at the coach and want to go play over here. If I'm just doing that, I can't do that if I started that program at school A.
What about grades? Do grades factor in at all?
Well, that's one of the things, and I'll cover that. Grades are you still have to have a 2.0 to be eligible to play, as far as they're concerned. The only thing I haven't seen is that, you know, if they change the thing about age, the age is 19 and 9. I have not seen that in law, so I'm assuming that's one of the questions I have. That's still going to be followed as well. Mid-season transfers may seek to immediately join a team under certain conditions. If the rosters for the sport has not reached maximum size, coach determines the student has skills and the ability, and here again, they may not participate in the same sport at another school in the same year unless they meet those exceptions that I just talked about. So what they're saying here is that if I'm at school A and I want to play basketball at school B, I can move as long as there's a seat. If the team's already been chosen and they're at maximum capacity, My question, and one question I have is, do I have to let that kid try out? Because I got my team's already at capacity. You know, if I bring this kid in and I'm at capacity, I let this kid try out, he's good enough to be on the team, am I gonna cut somebody that's already made the team? That's gonna create a lot more issues, you know, between coaches and parents and schools and things like that so we're trying to get some clarification on that.
What
And
about
is-
team capacity? I mean, who determines what,
Well,
when you
we
max
have
out?
the bylaws have when you have you have to fill out a roster for district playoffs or state playoffs every year.
Yeah.
So there's a maximum number of students you can put on that list. You don't normally carry that many, like basketball is 15, basketball is 15, I think soccer is 22. So, you know, the question arises now as a coach, am I gonna hold 2 spots open in case I get a transfer in? Or am I gonna have a full capacity, full team? So those are things that we're trying to get our answers on.
And Bruce, you know, the irony is they're saying a coach determines the student has the skills or the ability, and yet they're gonna hold the coach responsible on a $5,000 penalty of saying that they recruited him, but at the same time, I mean, that really puts that coach in, okay, you know, I mean, did he recruit him? I mean, not, I would say definitely not, but at the same time, if you're the parent that just got the kid kicked off the team, you're gonna say, that's who's gonna create the issue.
Absolutely. And the other question we have on this too is, let's say I'm at school A and I try out for basketball and I don't make the team. Well, you know, school B hasn't had their tryouts yet, or they're, you know, getting ready to have tryouts, so I just transfer over to school B and try out there. Our opinion, talking with Ron and them and Bobby and them, our opinion on that is that you've committed to that sport, you tried out for that sport, you didn't make it, so that's not gonna allow you to go somewhere else and try out.
But
So,
here's
right.
though the complexity of that. If the fact that we forced down open enrollment, there may have been a spot at that other school that he or she would have made if you didn't have open enrollment. But now you got 4 guys or girls that are coming in there, and it's made it so that that person can't be competitive on that team. So are we saying though we're not going to accommodate them over here because now a bunch of them have moved over? I don't know. That's one of my fears, is that my kid would have made the team last year, but now because of open enrollment, there's all these kids that came from, you know, another, you know, school B, they've come onto this team. My kid now doesn't have a shot. The only shot he'll have or she of playing is if they go over to school B. So, or did make the team last year. So that, I think if we're gonna have to, as a district, look at that, that's would be my concern of saying, no, because you committed, because.
Well, it kind of, that's clarification we're trying to get from FHSA. If they try out for a sport at a school, does that eliminate them from transferring over to another school and playing over there? We don't have that.
Try out again.
Yeah, we don't have that clarification yet, but that's where we kind of see that as a potential issue, because if I don't make the team here, I'm going over here and try out over here.
And maybe some of that may be, if it comes down to district stuff, we may have to then say tryouts for every place is only on one day, and it has to be decided that day, because otherwise, the problem is you're gonna have one school that says, listen, I'm holding my tryouts first, I wanna get all the good guys.
Yep.
And then the other teams are scrambling for other people. I mean, those are the things that I'm afraid is gonna happen.
We're gonna have to address. I mean, we could. I mean, hopefully there'll be some clarification. Does a tryout mean that that's, are you participating on the team and now you can't go to another school to play? But you know,
That's on my list of questions when we get down there. And
Hey Bruce, also with football, I've practiced with School A for spring. Am I committed to that school? If I spring football?
Yeah, but
Spring, I know in the past, and I'm pretty sure it'll be, spring is considered a continuation of fall from the previous year. Okay, that's why sometimes we get kids that transfer in zone from our school to Crystal River or Citrus or whatever. Those kids are not allowed to participate in the spring, because it's a continuation of fall. So
And I agree, because we always address that on the Section 2 Appeals Committee, if you've already
Right.
committed. But knowing this law and our legislators, and some legislator kid has been burned by this, is what
Oh,
was
yeah.
ruling. Because he wasn't, or she wasn't allowed to have another school, that we all know that's how these laws were put in place. So if they had an issue with football, that's probably gonna negate that.
Right. I think the big thing here with the participation that we've discussed up in the office prior is the fact that participation in the past by the FHSAA, it was deemed to have been tryouts. The minute they step on the court. So if they've already gone through the tryout process someplace, they're done. They're done for that season. They can go someplace else and play spring school.
The challenge though, Ben, is if, again, my concern is I've got someone now that's coming out of the area. They're going from school B to school A. They make the tryouts there, but now, but that makes someone who was playing on team A, they're gone. The coach at B would say, I would love to have that person that you've cast away. And they're saying, under coach's determination, student has the skills necessary. You would think then, at this point, then they can take them.
Well, that's the thing. I was walking behind that. One of the things we talked about, Bruce and I and Bobby, is there's a I don't know the best way to put this, moral and ethical issue here that they're forcing onto the coaches and onto the athletic directors. Saying that a kid can come from Fort Walton Beach, this is an extreme example, I kind of brewed this up in my head. Kid comes from Fort Walton Beach because we have AES.
Right.
Okay, comes down here and decides he wants to swim. Okay? First question is, which school does he get to swim for? Because he really doesn't have his own school. Okay? But let's say he comes down here and he's better than somebody that's been on the team for 3 years. Like you said, made the team, he's our #1 breaststroker or whatever for 3 years running. Now this kid comes in Fort Walton Beach because he wants to be at AES. But to supplant that kid, now that kid that's been here, it's been one of our kids. How, we now are forcing our coaches and our athletic administrators and you, okay, to ultimately, you're gonna hear it. Because I know how this works. Eventually, you guys are gonna get the phone call, you're gonna get the, why is Susie now, #3 not gonna go to district? Or not gonna make the team this year because this kid moved in from Hillsborough County. Okay, so now we've got that issue. We talked about the kid that plays football that comes in and plays basketball. Finishes up at Crystal River. Okay, I won't go ABC, I'm just gonna use his name. Okay, plays football at Crystal River, decides to come to Canton and play basketball. Okay, basketball practices traditionally, it's what, 2 weeks about? We're about, on boys' side, it's about 2 weeks, we're already into it. Coach has already picked 12 kids, kept 3 spots open. Well, they can put a kid into that run, but what happens if, they decide that they want to keep those 3 spots for JV move-ups? Now he's going to drop a kid off that 12 roster.
Here would be my answer to you as superintendent.
Yes, ma'am.
If you always kept that 12 position, or kept those 12 positions on your team, as far as I'm concerned, that's your capacity. And now they may outrule us on the law, but even though we're allowed to carry 15, if you've always carried 12, to me, that's your capacity.
Right, and
Now,
that's,
these are gonna be on a one-on-one by day. Yes, every board member's gonna get a phone call, probably every other day based on these things, so.
right, and that's the thing that I've been talking to my coaches, and I've been talking to Bobby and Larry and Bruce about, is they didn't think a lot of these things through, and Bruce is gonna hit on some other issues. Just
What
like
are you talking about, Tallahassee?
never. I mean, it's probably the first time this has ever happened. That we haven't brought it into. But it's going to put us in a bad situation because there's going to come a situation where a kid is going to be supplanted by a move-in. It happens every year in everything, but this could be more prevalent. Now, the radio station asked me a couple of weeks ago, do you see groups of kids moving? No, I do not see roving bands of children, going from school to school. Okay, but you will have those isolated instances, and it's going to come to you all eventually.
but it's really gonna put a lot of pressure on.
And sometimes I'm wondering if it's not gonna be as much of the team sports as the more individual sports, where it's easier for a single person, you know, to move. And swimming, for example, is that type of example. Tennis, golf, those where, you know, one or two players can make a huge difference in those teams, so. You know, I mean, and we've talked about it, and later I'll give Bruce a kudos on some things, but, you know, if you are a part of the swim dive team in Citrus and you want to be able to go on to and be part of a team that goes on to regionals, you're going to have a difficult time because they currently didn't have a dive team. And you can't get enough points to do that. So you're going to, if you want to do that, you've got to go over to Crystal River or Lecanto, where they have that ability and they have those points to be able to do that. So this is wrong. Let me just say, for those who are listening, this is wrong what they have done. So, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, no problem. I'm just going to briefly touch on recruiting. One of the things that, you know, people complained about the bill, you know, about, well, this is going to open up recruiting and stuff like that. Well, they always fired back. We put teeth into recruiting now. Well, if you're a coach, yeah, it's got a lot of teeth, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really penalize the people who are doing the actual recruiting, because studies will show that, yeah, there are coaches who will recruit. But most of your recruiting is done by parents, or as I would call them, friends of the program. You know, they don't realize that, you know, because my son's on that team, I can go out and talk to somebody else's son who's on another team and say, man, you ought to come over to our school. We got all this going on over there. Now, that's recruiting, regardless of how you put it. I mean, they have, the way the laws and the Red Book are now, you can hold people accountable for like that. But when they did this law, basically they focused on coaches and pretty much coaches and athletic directors and principals or whoever else that would be recruiting. Recruiting violations have been increased, and the burden of proof decreased, targeting the school employees. Now they're tying money into it. So a first offense is the coach would be fined $5,000. Second offense would be, they would be suspended for 1 year and fined $5,000, suspended from coaching. Third offense, forfeiture of the salary payment of $5,000, a fine, and then a probable cause was found, they could revoke the certificate for 3 years. But it gets harder and harder to prove recruiting from a coach, because coaches, with this law now, coaches really don't have to recruit. If your program is successful, and I'll use Sean Callahan at Armwood High School and Robert Weiner at Plant High School, they don't have to say a word to anybody. Their success that their programs have achieved is going to draw the better athletes from the schools in Hillsborough County. So they don't have to recruit. Their schools their success does it for them. But a lot of these coaches are getting smarter ways of getting away with it. One of the newest issues I heard not long ago was that some coaches are starting to use what they call them a burner phone. They'll go to Walmart or somewhere and get one of these track phones or $20 phones. They'll do all their texting, calling, and whatever to potential athletes, and then break the phone or throw it away, and you have no record of it, unless the kid keeps it on his phone or whatever. But according to to be guilty, now it's a preponderance of the evidence rather than clear and convincing evidence.
Bruce, one of the concerns that I have is because just what you said, the coaches that really, the programs that would be recruiting kids don't have to really do anything. A coach that is simply, what happens if a parent comes up, coach may or may not even know where that person lives, doesn't care, because they're saying, hey coach, I'm looking, I'm looking my kid to come out for football. Can you tell me about your program? And the coach responds in just normal stuff. Well, this is what we do. We offer this. I have this. And they're talking about their program. And they go, well, that's where I want to be. Is it recruiting? Because, they're talking about the positives of their program. Has nothing to do with saying, I want your kid, but what we do for kids.
Well, I'm going to ask Ron this, but I know in the past I know Ron has told their coaches, if somebody comes to you about your program, you basically have to, or coming to this school, you have to send them to the athletic director or to the guidance counselor. They don't say anything about their program or anything about the school, just so they don't get caught up in what you're saying. But I know you're right. There's some coaches who just, before they think, they just, oh, well, like you said, they tell us, what we've done in the past, what we do, how we're successful and stuff like that. But I know the athletic directors address that with their coaches about if somebody comes up and you don't know where they go to school, they may ask them, do you go to our school or are you zone? Well, zone won't be an issue now, but they have told them in the past not to, they won't talk about their programs.
This is put everything on these coaches, and we've talked about, they have a tough enough time without having to have this now put on.
Well, the preponderance of evidence has lowered that, as far as proof, burden of proof, the preponderance of evidence is, what if a coach has knowledge of a parent or a group of people trying to get a student to come to that school? Is that knowledge enough to say the coach was involved? Was that knowledge enough to show?
That would have to come out during the investigation. I think the way it's going to work is if there's a complaint, if someone is suspected, a coach of recruiting, they have to contact the FHSAA, and the FHSAA will schedule a investigation. The investigator comes down, and then they only have so many days in which to do the investigation in. And then the FHSAA hires an outside independent investigator to come down and do it.
Right. Well, coaches will have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because obviously that could be what parent or what other people do. They'll accuse the coach of recruiting, to have an investigation come forward and look at that preponderance of evidence, and that could really put coaches in a tough spot again too. But my question would be, what is the coach's responsibility to stay free and stay clear of a recruiting violation?
I know I hope that we are telling our coaches that when they have their meeting with their parents and stuff, that they can't do that.
Yeah.
That you tell them that, if you go out and you talk about our program to somebody else who doesn't go to school here, that's considered recruiting. You can get me in a lot of trouble if it comes back that I know about it, or that I'm approving of you doing that. And I know some parents are just trying to help out, but they don't understand the magnitude of the penalties or the magnitude of importance of what they're doing as far as the recruiting part goes.
But the stupidity of this is that for the 2017-2018 school year, if the ADs isolate the coach from any of that, and I'm not saying that they are, but the ADs and anyone else for that matter could recruit on behalf of the school, and it appears that FHSAA has no violation now. And that's the part that, to me, is the absurdity of saying you did create recruiting. You expanded recruiting by the fact that you've only had one person now responsible for it. But everybody else is free game to recruit for the school, as long as the coach doesn't know about it.
Right. Well, it gets a little bit better, because now, even if there's a suspected kid that's been recruited, he's allowed to participate up until the recruitment or the recruiting incident is determined whether or not. So he can play, beforehand, if there was a recruiting problem, the kid didn't play. Because if the kid
Now
played,
we can play.
well, the kid can play now.
But
However, if they find that the kid was recruited, then they would go back and forfeit every game that kid played in.
But the other thing of this that we know, the students can recruit all they want.
Yeah.
Each other.
Yep.
And as long as the coach doesn't know about it, and that's what's really going to happen. I mean, that to me is where the #1 recruiting is going to happen, is going to be the athletes to the other athletes. Come over to our program, especially with club sports.
And just like the last statement here was, the student may not be declared ineligible based on violation of recruiting rules unless the student or parent has falsified any enrollment or eligibility document or accepted any benefit, if such benefit is not generally available to the school students or family members, or is based in any way on athletic interest, potential, or performance. So, it's, they say they put some teeth into the recruiting, and then there's the part I talked about, so they can play, but it may not be affected by any alleged recruiting violation until final disposition of the allegation. So you as a coach, if you have a kid that's under investigation, you gotta determine whether or not chances of him winning or losing is, because if you think he's gonna win it, win the appeal or then you don't have anything to worry about. But if you have any idea that he might lose it, then if you play him and he does lose, then you're gonna have to forfeit all those games. This basically was something that I found, it was definition of participation. They're requiring medical forms now expanded to even to include off-season conditioning. We have that now. We make our kids have all the physical forms and stuff like that. So whether or not they make the team or not, they have to have it if they're working out.
This is rough,
Yeah.
the one you're gonna get.
Yeah, this one came up a few years ago in another bill that was not, that never made it through, but now they're saying that any non-member in small private schools that are 125 students or less may participate in a zone public school in whatever sports their private school does not offer. I know we had, a couple of years ago, there were some students from Inverness Christian that wanted to swim, but because they had intramurals, they were not allowed by FHSA policy. Well, they've changed that now. So if there's a private school in Citrus County that has 125 students or less, and they don't offer swimming or wrestling or whatever, then they can participate at a zone school that they would normally attend. They don't have that flexibility of open enrollment for that because they are a member of a private school.
So,
But they would have to try out just like any.
Yeah, they would have to try out just like anybody else. Yeah.
but for example, Pope John Paul right now, which I'm assuming is under 125, certainly from their middle school, for sure. All of those students now are eligible to play at whatever school that they choose, right? Or their zone school.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then they can play they can play sports at whatever school. And I'm assuming Seven Rivers, even if, because there are sports they don't.
They're considered a member school.
They are a member school, okay.
Now, they may not be a member in every.
So Inverness Christian, Pope John Paul, I'm sorry, it's St. Paul, St. I always forget because it's.
Yeah, if they're not a member school would be any sport that's classified as FHSAA, and Seven Rivers is classified in basketball and other sports, so they are considered a member school.
So St. Paul would be one, probably Inverness
Yes,
Christian.
I would think I would think they would be probably more than 125. That would be something we'd have to find out before we allow them to participate. Because I
He
know
was mentioning level, though, does the
But
level
see, if they're
count?
not, if they're,
K through 3?
you know, is it gonna classify by level? You know,
I don't think they I think they just say by total enrollment, whether it's K-12 or you said, because it just says small private schools, 125 or less. It doesn't say middle school, high school, just that total number of students in the school.
That would be good.
Yeah, I think it would be.
Yeah, is it like for the high school, they have 125 high school students or less? Or, you know, if you combine some of these schools that are K through 12th grade, they probably have 125,
Sure.
but not just for high school, not just for.
Yeah, I'll put that on as one of my clarifications. GPA requirements are the same, and Ron, have you heard anything on the age? We don't keep it the same for age part, 19.9?
Well, it's, right now, the age, it's transferring from 19.9 to a straight 19 as of September 1st. With, I think, we talked about last section, because I think it was, this year's sophomore classes, last one was 19.9. So as they progress up, eventually 19.9, they'll be 19. If you're 19 before September 1st, you can't participate. The GPAs will remain the same.
How this affects homeschool students, individual homeschool students able to participate at the public school to which the student would be assigned according to the district school board attendance area policies, or which the student could choose to attend pursuant to the statute. Now, these are some questions, again, that I have for clarification, because, you know, it says here, they can play at the school that they would be signed if they were like a zone school, or they could use like open enrollment. So I'm not sure,
That's what.
you know, they're kind of,
Yeah.
you know, giving you both spectrums and not being real clear. So that's one of the questions I have for them up there. And then you also have the virtual school students, basically the same same thing, is they can participate at any school, at the zone school, or choose to attend.
So, you know, the question to me is, if you're an AES student that's also a virtual student, where do they get to play?
Well, according to what I'm seeing here, they would be able to either choose to play at the school they would be zoned for, or they could choose any school. That's where I gotta get, that's where,
Yeah, that's what's to me.
I need clarification on that, because you're right, there will be some people who fall under that. Now, charter school's a little bit different. They can participate with the student, school the student would be assigned, or which student could attend, but it would have to be in a sport that's not offered at their school. So if they have a charter school that offers football, basketball, and baseball, if they wanted to play golf or swim, then that charter school student could swim.
Okay, so now, does that mean the AES student during the first semester can go and play at any school in the district, but when they go back to their home school, then they have to play at their home school?
That's one of those.
I mean,
Yeah,
that to me, it leaves that really at a big question, because AES doesn't have sports programs. And if they are a charter school student at that time, it would certainly seem to be that they could then, I think that's gonna be some.
That's good questions for me to get clarification on, but it shows these things like this that these people did not think about when they were making this law. And then, basically, the district school board, charter school, or private schools must include student eligibility standards and related disciplinary actions in the student code of conduct. And it tells you there the statute. It just basically means you have to list anything that would get them a student kicked off a team or disqualified or something like that. You have to put that in your code of conduct. Yeah, I think that leads to any questions.
The only, and most of the board may know this already, but the difference between a full membership and a partial membership by sport has to do with, at the end of the day, some of the championships involvement. If you are, I believe if you're a full member with all your sports, you can participate then all the way through championships. But if I'm only in soccer, I'm not going to be able to go to the championships.
According to FHSA, if you're a full member, you can qualify to participate in the state championship series, which means districts, regionals, all the way up to the Final Four. If you only join by sport, then you will not be able to qualify to play in the district championship. Now, the Sunshine Athletic Conference is crying foul right now. They're saying that the FHSA is not following the law, but I'll let them figure that out. But according to what FHSA said, this came out of a blast that they sent an email out a couple of weeks ago that basically said if you're a member school, that means member for all sports, then you would qualify to participate to the state series all the way to the championship game. If you are joining by sport, you lose that privilege.
I understand.
That doesn't affect our public schools. Public schools could do that, but all of our public schools, all our high schools are joined by sport, or by our full members.
So the student eligibility standards and related disciplinary actions have to be listed in the student code of conduct. And so that'll have to be for the 17-18 school year.
Yes,
And they're not in there right now, as I recall. Is that correct?
correct.
Now, my question is not necessarily the eligibility standards, because that'll probably be the same for all sports, but this related disciplinary actions, because I know from my students my kids playing on different teams, they have different contracts they sign and different penalties. So how are we going to deal with that as far as, does that related disciplinary actions deal with the team itself, or what do you think that deals with?
Those are non-negotiable.
Like if they're arrested or those type things?
Yeah, we have a list now of non-negotiables.
Is that the part
In our
in
handbook.
our handbook?
Yeah.
I was going to say in our athletics handbook, district-wide
Yes,
athletics handbook.
and we have some non-negotiables. I can send you that so you can look at it. But I think it's more talking about across the board, like if, of course, the kid's expelled or just, from school, he can't participate.
Right.
If he's suspended from school, depending on the length of suspension, he can't participate during that time of suspension and things like that. I really haven't had a chance to look at that last
But not
106.
practice, because different coaches deal with missing practices differently.
Well, if they've been suspended from school, they're not allowed to practice, because they're not supposed to be on school grounds.
Oh, I know that. No, I'm
Yeah.
just saying the related disciplinary actions. One coach may punish someone differently than another coach in a different sport for missing a practice. Is the related disciplinary?
I don't think that's
We're not dealing with individuals.
individuals, no.
We're dealing with the non-negotiable
Yeah.
things. Okay. But it still has to be in our student code of conduct.
According to this law, yes, according to the bill. Any other questions?
Does that then mean that basically our athletics handbook will have to be part of the code of conduct?
I don't.
Or portions that are currently in there now?
That's,
Or maybe they can be referenced to.
probably
Maybe they can be
that's
referenced.
really beyond my scope right there when you're talking. I haven't looked at that whole bill, because it says, it says statute 106. I haven't looked at that statute to see what's under that view.
Wes is on.
Okay.
Let me ask you, if a child goes to another school to play a sport, let's say basketball, he just goes in and tries out, or does he go in and take a class and get conditioned,
enroll,
and then, enroll, but then try out? What I'm thinking, in my mind, I see all
They would
these
have to
kids
be enrolled
coming
in the
from
school for tryout.
home school and places where they have not been conditioned, and then going out and trying out and breaking something immediately, they're not in the condition. Coach, would not have them on the team if they couldn't do it, but still, the first.
Yeah, normally what'll happen, even homeschool students, if they want to play basketball at a school, most basketball programs will have a conditioning period prior to tryouts. So normally the homeschool kids who want to play basketball, they have to notify an intent to play. And right now it has to be by the first day of practice, right?
Yes.
So they have to notify the school, I'm a homeschool student, I want to play basketball. They have to do it by the first day of practice. So when they find out when tryouts are, they should be going to those tryouts or the conditioning time. And basically it's lifting weights, running and stuff like that, getting in physical conditioning before practices and stuff like that.
So we're gonna allow our 3 high schools to say if Thomas wants to try out for swimming at Lecanto High and he's still going to Chris River High, does he have to get an out and go to Lecanto? Because our homeschool students aren't, virtual students aren't.
Well,
So, I mean, we're gonna hold one
Right,
student
gonna
to
pick on
different
them.
standards, so.
Well, I think that's a great, that is a,
I think to be able to try out at the school that you're going to, you need to be enrolled, whether it's, you change and enroll or you go through the process. Well,
I don't disagree,
but the problem is it's gonna be inequitable to different students. And I don't know that we are gonna wanna be inequitable to different students. So we either have to hold them all to the same standard, and if we're gonna have to develop policy that reflects that, I think the board's gonna wanna do something that is equitable to all parties.
yeah.
And it may be we're gonna need you all to advise us is what's gonna happen as to how to accomplish that.
I'm not following how it's gonna happen.
If you're a homeschool student, you can
Right.
now try out for basketball at Canton High School, correct? All right,
But
if I'm a
if-
Citrus High School student and I want to play basketball at Canton, why won't you let me?
That's the way the statute's written. I don't think-
You really can't do anything about that, because the state legislators have decided that's what we must do.
I agree, but does the law, that's what I'm asking, does the law say that a public school student cannot try out for another school unless he or she's
Yeah, you have to be-
enrolled?
you have
Does
to
it
be
say
enrolled.
enrolled
You
in
have to
that
be
school?
enrolled.
The law says that.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't play football for Citrus. Why would I?
I don't disagree with that, I'm just saying, I mean, we're just.
But then that is gonna be, though, the challenge is, and this is what I think then the legislators are, they've set it up where you can change schools and play for a different sport. So at the same time, and I don't necessarily, and I do not agree with that, so let me state that. Their intent was to permit people to have a fall sport at one school and a spring sport at a different school. Now what they're saying is, though, you could do the same thing if you are trying out, you are enrolled at one school and you want to switch to another school. It is the same
You're
thing.
not gonna be able to start tryouts until you're enrolled. You have to be enrolled in order to start process.
But if you're a homeschool student, you could. If you are an AES student, you could.
Right, but that's,
Because it states that.
Because it does state that.
yes, it does state that, but there's nothing you can do as a board basically permit or to prohibit a homeschool kid from doing that. Because statute states they basically do what you're saying.
But is there statute that requires that a student, in order to try out, so you hold tryouts for cheerleading in the spring for the fall?
Yeah, I think the FHSA rules are you're, to put it the way I was told on the phone time, Mike Colby, is their butt has to be in a seat in order to try out.
But is that still the determination after 7029?
I'm pretty sure it will be, yeah. That's, well, to get that clarification. but-
Yeah, I think we're gonna need that, because then the question is, 7029 also gives coaches discretion based on abilities.
We've always had discretion.
But the difference is we haven't had to exercise those things, because you didn't have homeschoolers having a different time that they could come in or try out than someone that's that is a regular zone student. So the difference that 7029 is, it's opened up the ability for the athlete to jump around.
They could do that now, but they just had to be there by the first day of practice of tryout period, which you can have open tryouts. I don't know if a lot of people understand that. You know, a kid could be at Chris River playing football. If they left Chris River and got an out-of-zone waiver under the current system, and were at Canto or Citrus by the beginning first day of basketball, they could be in the trial process there. Homeschool student under the current, same thing. They could be playing football. They have to declare what they want to do over here.
The only thing though that I think what comes to mind is there has been often, even within schools, coordination of holding spots. And so within certain schools, that's been permitted, and so that's where I'm saying this really muddies a lot of things up, because you have overlapping sports, and so you would hold a spot, coaches would hold a spot for a kid who's finishing up one sport that's in districts to make sure there was room over here.
Sure they will.
So now what we're saying is we're gonna say, no, we're not gonna do that, and oh, absolutely not, we're gonna start saying, you had to be transferred at that school, but we all know that the reality is, depending on the quality of that athlete, it is making this far more of a problem. Because now, and that's where I think our concern is, we're gonna start getting those phone calls.
That's what I said an hour ago.
No, but that's why I'm saying, so then the question though that we may be under is there discretion that we have in policy and guidelines to say there is an expectation that we would make those accommodations?
I think when Bruce comes back with all of his questions answered, then we'll know.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Dodge, you want to say
Well,
something?
Thomas brought up the cheerleading question, and if FHSAA, they only govern cheerleading if they compete, is that right? Or,
It's competitive cheerleading.
okay,
But their policy on competitive cheerleading is if you're gonna try out, you have to be enrolled in that school to try out.
okay, so, do we have competitive cheerleading? Okay, so because they have cheerleading practices at the end of this year for next cheerleading squad, right? So those are already set, but we don't have to worry about cheerleaders on this law, is that right? This,
Not yet.
we're not competitive, not yet, but if one of them were to go competitive, then that's when,
Well, if one goes, they're all going, but I don't think any of them. The problem with cheerleading is you can't count it towards gender equity.
that's right. And that's something that would help if we could count it towards Title IX, gender equity, right?
Or we have flag football.
They want to start.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Any other questions?
Good luck.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Sheffield.
Thank
Mr.
you, Ron.
Sheffield
Thank
has
you,
been
Ron.
tracking this since inception, and I just appreciate it so much.
Just beginning.
Bobby?
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
It'll be real fun for next year.
Ms. Hubbard, you're on next, I believe. Involuntary examination under the Baker Act.
So that's good information.
I'll just give you a brief overview, and then Ms. Humbaugh can give you the details. I have two policy workshops for you today. The first one is 5.55. This is a request to review the revision of policy 5.55, notification of involuntary examination, and we added under the Baker Act for clarification. This is a required policy and procedures for notification of parent involuntary examination required by the revision to statute 1002.20. And we have added within the title under the Baker Act and also within the text. And I think Ms. Humbaugh will be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
The rest of this is statute, is that correct?
Yeah, so the Baker Act, you have to notify the parent unless you have 24 hours of meetings a day.
And what do you all need from us on this one today?
Just,
It's a workshop.
if you
Just-
have any questions on
Just a
it.
question.
Yeah,
So
if you're good to go, we move forward.
the reason that there's that time lapse is if somebody suspects the parents or.
Yeah.
That's all.
Ms. Humbaugh?
I'm sorry, what was your question, Ms. Bryant?
The reason there's a 24-hour time lapse is because the parents are suspect.
This, and that's why the verbiage was, the little bit was added to the end, it just pertains to Baker Acts. It doesn't have anything to do with child abuse. It's an involuntary examination, and that's what I think is misleading, the word examination. It's when, like, law enforcement in conjunction with like a social worker or school counselor is assessing a student to determine if they need to be Baker Acted. And that, the way it was written, it did cause a lot of confusion as why the Baker Act part was added. Okay.
Thank you. And now we have bullying and harassment.
Yes, the next policy is a new one, and I think you had reviewed this previously. We had it all lumped together, students and staff. We've now broken it out so that this particular policy, 6.26, deals with staff or employee. And Mr. Bradshaw, after it was heard by policy and forms, added a couple of things on page 4, section 2, and section B1. And I don't know if yours are in yellow or not.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Okay. And may lead to disciplinary action, including termination in both cases. Any questions?
Thank you. And now we have the board input together consensus to draft a policy for Navy and facility. And are you doing that, Chicago?
Yes, this is just basically to get input from the board to determine whether or not we need to move forward with the policy in this regard. And we did do a survey of the principals to figure out how many facilities are in fact named. And I'll just pass that around so you can see it. There may be some that we didn't get.
Here's the other concern with the school district. People always walk up to people wanting to name things, and there's really no guidelines, concrete guidelines that tell us that I could look at someone and say, here's how the process goes. All right, so we just asked Chuck to bring this to you all to see if you all had some ideas. If you want us to work on a policy, he can gather policies from other districts, he can prepare them and bring back a recommendation for you all to workshop and discuss. So that's why it's here.
Just for verification, we do not have anything in policy regarding any building name whatsoever. Is that correct?
Chuck, I think we discussed
I thought we
that,
had
yeah.
some.
You have something for a memorial?
Yeah.
2.91.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
It just says, upon occasion, individuals, families, or groups may desire to show respect for a deceased member of the school community,
There it is.
etc. Suggested means of expressing grief include monetary donations to schools, charities, or scholarships. However, no memorials of a permanent nature shall be accepted without school board approval. So it doesn't say that you can't do it, but
So each one of these, at some point, went through board approval, is that correct? Or theoretically would have? Because these are permanent.
A lot of them went through the SAC committee, the school community.
I don't know if any of these that came.
Ginger Porter Drive did.
Yeah,
Ginger Porter did, but the rest of them, they were local school decisions, they went through the SAC committee, went through the school community, input from things, such as that, but it never came to us because it was never what we considered a building or a permanent facility.
Not a whole school has ever been named after anybody.
Correct.
Good.
So that's what we need to know, if you all want us to move forward and work on something, and even with these, the naming of these, even every school may not have done it identical. So there's really no process for even the baseball fields to be named, or football field, there's no process in place.
I was gonna say here, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, the Curtis Peterson and the Roger Weaver are the only ones that I'm aware of that are a single building or, oh, I know, there's one more actually, I think they actually have the TRC.
That's right.
That's true.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, is named after.
John Headley.
John Headley.
Here's, does anybody want to know what I think about it?
Yes, we did,
He would
please.
love it.
Yes.
If you wanted to name Christopher Middle School Ginger Bryant School, that would be fine, except I could go stark red and climbing up the flagpole crazy and do some awful things. So that's why it should be named after people who have died. You know what I'm saying?
That's why it shouldn't be named until, say that again now? That's why it shouldn't be named until someone has died, has passed away.
Right. Because, I mean, this person is a fine person and sane as a judge, but will they always be? And will they do something that will embarrass our whole community? Maybe. You know what I'm saying?
And Ms. Bryant, you're right, because that is a common policy
Yeah.
in other boards, that you can't name a permanent structure thing after someone until they have passed.
Now, I know that Roger Weaver is gone, and I know that John Headley's gone. What about Curtis Peterson? Did he die?
I believe he has.
Yeah.
actually.
Okay, good. We're
And
good.
so is Barry Cannon, obviously, that was the Barry Cannon Memorial
Yeah.
Aquarium, and so did was
Right.
the TRC building.
John
But
Headley.
then the question is, in the future, like for example, stadiums, things, those have been often named after individuals, and I've been thrilled because those often people have contributed greatly to those communities.
And that's little parts of schools, and if the school wants to do that,
Yeah.
I think the tradition, and I was on one of the last school naming committees, actually before I was a board member, but as a parent, for Central Ridge Elementary, and I actually was one of the people
that was
that came
fun,
up with
wasn't
it.
it?
It was, you know what, there was a lot of pressure to name it after individuals or individuals. But I think that the consensus at that time was that naming it after a geographical area that the school represented seemed to have the most broadest positive impact, because for a lot of people, they didn't necessarily have a connection to a person. And in some cases, that person may not have contributed to that school. And so the problem is there might be someone who was named and they had no contribution to that area or that community, and because it was a new school, it wouldn't have that. So I think that these schools have done well. There is 2 schools in Citrus County that were named after individuals. There are schools that no longer exist. That would have been the Booker T. Washington School and help me out, Ms. Ginger.
George Washington.
And the George Washington Carver. And both of those schools have, I believe, at each location, or at least at one of them, they've been memorialized.
Because neither one of those 2 people are still living.
And they're still not.
That
living.
works.
So at the very least, I would say, one consensus maybe is that they're not named after someone living.
I think so, and also, maybe not named after anyone, maybe named after a location. Because if you know Christopher River High School, you're not going to go looking for it in Inverness, you're going
Right.
to find the schools. So I like that, where it sort of locates where the school is.
So when you all, your discussion, so if you talk about a stadium, a gymnasium, a track field,
The
whatever,
road to the stadium.
or the road,
Yeah.
so
It's
are we
different.
wanting 2 separate guidelines, or we wanting facilities? I mean, when we say facilities, we're thinking naming of the school.
Well, I think that there should be some process for even the naming of a stadium or
There should be.
something, that there's a process. We did it for Ginger Porter since I've been on the board. It came to the board for a board vote. So, I mean, I would like to see, well, where does it start? It starts at the SAC committee, or the principal makes a recommendation to the superintendent and staff, and then there's a committee maybe. I mean, there's different ways we could go.
Some districts have a sheet that talks about Mike Mullen, and we're going to name the football field after Mike Mullen or something. So we give his name, his accomplishments, how many, it gives you little guidelines, so they just don't go pick out gymnasium or something. So-
Right. And also, I think where we're thinking as far as, what if there was someone who wanted to donate X amount of dollars to build a new theater, or to build a football stadium at Citrus Springs Middle School, or a football field, what if they would want to donate $100,000 or $250,000 or $1 million? Well, we don't really have anything in the policy on that either. I mean, that we want to leave it open for the board to be able to make decisions, but if someone
To give us that much money, we'd
Right.
have to consider it, wouldn't we?
and we would, and we would want to have that ability to do so. I mean, I understand that's what happened with Curtis Peterson Auditorium. Wasn't he the senator that helped through Roger Weaver? They got all that money.
So why don't we give Chuck,
Here's some examples,
if you all
by the
would
way.
like to do that, give Chuck the direction to form a small group, come up with some guidelines for
Right.
ancillary,
Yeah.
gymnasiums, cafeterias, whatever, and also buildings.
I
Okay.
can certainly do that. I
And
have,
report back to the board.
EMCS doesn't have any recommendations on this particular issue because it's not a state mandate, but we do have examples from the other counties that we've received.
Because here's the other thing that we can be under. Okay, so if an individual wants to donate money, as has happened, and we might approve that for a game of a facility, what happens if Duke Energy wants to, and they want to put their logo on the side of something?
That's true too.
And so we want to, and I can see Mr. West over there, I think we have to also be careful that we don't either box ourselves in either direction of that, either by saying, well, you do it for an individual, but you won't do it for a corporation, or we don't want to do it for corporations. We would consider individuals if they have passed. Those I think are going to be some considerations.
But not a whole school, not a whole school.
No, I'm talking about any of those,
Individual.
because I do think that, I would agree with Mr. Dodd. I think that a stadium or something of that nature probably should be something that should come before the board on that. Now, I would give great weight to how that school or SAC, is the one bringing that forward,
And that can be part of the guidelines.
and that could be part of that.
I like that.
No,
So,
Let me just make
Mr.
sure I got
Dixon, you
right
have it? Okay.
Correction is, you want a policy in order to allow for, not necessarily buildings like major, like if you don't have it in policy, you can still do it as the school board. You can name a school as you see fit. You don't have to have it in policy. But if you want something to come from the schools or from the community, you want a process in place so that it goes to the school first, and then it goes to the district, and then it comes to the school board, and criteria in place so that they know what's required.
Right, if they want to name the gym after someone or a facility, this is what you would have to do, but then it would, that's what I see.
I will tell you,
Yeah.
principals call us several times and ask, and there's no set guidelines for them to do. So if the district and the board can agree to something like that, the principals would appreciate that.
And I think that the other thing that I would want to be careful of is there are schools that have named rooms, for example, for people. I don't think the board needs to get involved with that level. I think that if it's a permanent name that is going to be considered, and an example to me, if Citrus High's gymnasium gets named after somebody, has it been? Okay, it doesn't. So if they wanted to name it after somebody, they may have a very valid reason for a number of circumstances. I just think that probably needs to come to the board at some point for that approval. And so that's where I think it's not as much maybe of the do's or as much as it is the don'ts that we're talking about.
I think I know what you.
Mr. Dixon, you have enough information, is the board being clear?
Yes, ma'am.
I tried to be clear.
Chuck will draft something, we'll take it through policy forums, and then we'll come back.
I think that's the way to go.
Right, and I'll also coordinate with the board if they have any further comments.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dixon.
Okay, next up, self-insurance update.
Hello.
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Yes,
Chairperson, I'm sorry. After this presentation, could we take a 5-minute break?
Absolutely.
As
Or
we
we
have
can
a
take it right
budget-
down.
Well, it doesn't matter to me, but I'd like to have, I mean, because we have a budget presentation too coming up, right?
Yes, we do.
So
But I think is that it?
Yes, it is. Want to break now or?
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's have a break now. Sure, excuse us, we gotta take a little break, thank you.
Please come get set up, Sherry.
Okay, I know it's long. I won't leave you, I promise.
You seem lost in thought. It must scare you what we might try to do. Some of us are crazy.
You shut us off.